The day began with an unease that clung to the air. Rachel Hart stood quietly on the porch of her cabin, listening to the faint crackle of the burned hills beyond. It had been nearly a month since the wildfire tore through Willow Bay, leaving behind nothing but blackened trees and ghosts of smoke. Yet even now, the scent of ash still drifted on the breeze, mixing strangely with the salty breath of the ocean. Every time the wind shifted, it carried with it the reminder of loss, of fire, of something unfinished. Rachel held her chipped enamel mug in one hand, meaning only to scoop some water from the rain barrel and get on with her morning. The porch. Boards groaned softly under her step, their wood warped by years of storms. The fog rolled in thick from the charred slopes, wrapping her world in a gray silence that pressed against her ears like cotton. Then it happened. A shadow began to form inside the mist, faint at first, then clearer with every heartbeat. Rachel's breath caught in her throat as the figure emerged. Out of the pale wall of fog came a German shepherd, its steps uneven, its body moving with a kind of broken urgency. The dog's once proud coat was smeared with mud and streaked with ash. Singed patches of fur revealed raw, pink skin underneath. But the animal did not falter. In its jaws, clamped with the gentlest precision, hung a tiny bundle, a puppy, soaked, limp, and streaked with blood. Its small legs dangled helplessly, fur matted and clumped together. Rachel froze mid-step. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. She had seen injured strays before, but never like this. Not a mother carrying her dying young. The shepherd stopped at the bottom of the porch steps and lifted its head. Those deep brown eyes found Rachel's and held her. They were rimmed, red with exhaustion but blazing with something else, something sharp and pleading. The puppy stirred, letting out the faintest, wet whimper. The sound shattered Rachel's stillness. Her enamel mug slipped from her grip, clattering against the bay porch railing before rolling noisily across the warped boards. Without thinking, Rachel dropped to her knees, hand reaching out in a slow, careful motion. "Easy," she whispered, her voice low, steadying herself as much as the animal. The shepherd lowered its head with measured care and released the pup into her waiting hands. The tiny body quivered against her palms, its breath shallow, weak. Rachel pressed 2 fingers lightly to its fragile ribs. Still alive. Barely, but still alive. Relief and fear surged together in her chest. When her eyes lifted back to the shepherd, she saw its chest rising and falling too quickly, its whole body shaking with strain. A faint whine escaped its throat, more than a sound. It was a message. Then, with a sharp tilt of its head, the dog turned toward the blackened tree line. It looked back at her once more, gaze locked and unblinking, as if to say, "This is not the end. There's more. Follow me." Rachel noticed then the cracked leather collar hanging loosely around its neck. A tarnished brass plate caught a weak flicker of light. The name scratched into it, barely visible through soot and grime, was Ranger. The puppy whimpered again, pulling her attention back. She drew it close to her chest, cradling it as though her own heartbeat might lend it strength. Ranger's tail flicked once, but his stance was rigid, waiting. The wind shifted, carrying faint echoes, the crackle of movement from somewhere, deep in the burned forest. Rachel's breath fogged the air. Something about this shepherd's presence left her shaken. Not just his injuries, not just the plea in his eyes, but the certainty with which he stood before her. This dog had purpose. Rachel pushed the door open with her shoulder and hurried inside, Ranger padding close behind her. The puppy was icy cold, too cold. She laid him gently on her battered kitchen table, a surface scattered with unopened letters, and yesterday's chipped coffee cup. Her hands began to move without hesitation, driven by memory. Years in the pediatric ward had taught her more than she cared to remember about fragile bodies and desperate moments. She reached up to the shelf above the sink and pulled down her faded red first aid kit. The metal clasp snapped open. Inside, gauze, antiseptic, scissors, tape. "Stay," she murmured to Ranger without looking up. The shepherd obeyed, planting himself at the corner of the table. His head lowered, his eyes never leaving her hands, his breath ragged but steady. Rachel worked quickly, trimming blood-matted fur from the puppy's hind leg. Beneath it, a jagged gash stretched deep, oozing but not spurting. Relief flickered, no artery cut. She pressed gauze against the wound, fingers steady, feeling the faint pulse beneath. "Hang in there, little one," she whispered, the words, more for herself than the pup. The sting of antiseptic filled the room as she cleaned the wound. The puppy twitched, releasing a weak whimper that pierced her chest. Ranger answered with a low, guttural whine, shifting his weight but holding his ground. Rachel bound the leg with care, securing the bandage neatly, then pried open the pup's mouth. Pale gums, too pale. Blood loss. She pulled her old stethoscope from the wall, slipping it into her ears. The heartbeat, rapid, fragile, but steady enough, echoed back. Outside, a gust rattled the window panes. The sound carried faint echoes from the forest, like whispers pressing at the edges of the cabin. Ranger's ears pricked instantly, his head turning, but then flicking back to Rachel. "You're not finished out there, are you?" she murmured. The shepherd gave a short flick of his tail, impatient now, before turning to the door. He pawed, at it firmly, deliberate, controlled. Rachel wrapped the pup in a clean towel and tucked him snug inside a laundry basket lined with a worn blanket. She paused only a moment, her hand brushing gently over the tiny chest. The rhythm of its breath was fragile, but steady. For now, turning back to Ranger, she saw him waiting, body taut, gaze sharp, energy vibrating through his stance. She grabbed her jacket from the wall, pulling it on without tearing her eyes from him. As she reached for her boots, something on his collar caught the dim light. She crouched, brushing away a layer of soot with her thumb. The letters etched faintly into the brass plate read, "SR Unit 7. Her breath caught. Search and rescue. Memories surfaced instantly, news reports, whispers around town. Unit 7 had gone missing during the wildfire, last seen searching for a stranded hiker. No bodies recovered. Their story drowned in the larger tragedy of the town's destruction. Rachel looked at Ranger again. Not just a survivor, but a rescuer left behind. His fur still carried the acrid scent of smoke and burnt earth. "You were part of the team," she said softly, more to herself than to him. Ranger didn't blink. His tail gave a single deliberate sweep. Then he turned back toward the forest, eyes fixed on the fog. Whatever waited out there, he was determined to show her. Rachel zipped her jacket and slung a small hiking pack over her shoulder. Movements, sharp and deliberate. She looked once more at the basket on the table. The fragile puppy curled in warmth, chest rising and falling in slow rhythm. Her hand lingered at the doorframe. The fog outside pressed against the windows, heavy and impenetrable, curling low over the ground. It swallowed the trail leading into the hills like a living thing. She hesitated, memories flashing, sterile hospital rooms, the endless beeping of monitors, the shattering sound of a mother's sobs when a child slipped away. She had sworn to herself, no more rescues, not again. But Ranger's eyes met hers, steady, demanding, refusing her refusal. She swallowed hard, tightened the straps of her pack, and whispered, almost to herself, "All right, let's see what's out there." Lay a weather-beaten backpack. She crouched, tugging it free. The fabric was stiff with soot and damp. But when she unzipped the main compartment, Asmol leather-bound notebooks slid into her palm. The edges were warped from water damage, the cover scarred with heat. She flipped it open carefully. The handwriting was tight but legible. Notes on rescue routes, supply counts, weather changes. Then the tone shifted. Accounts of the fire advancing faster than expected, the decision to shelter in place. Near the back, the ink blurred in places as if written in haste or with shaking hands. If anyone finds Ranger, please let him keep saving lives. Rachel's throat tightened. She looked up at the shepherd. He was watching her intently, head tilted, as if waiting for her to understand. "You belonged to Owen?" she murmured. Rears's ears twitched at the name. His gaze didn't waver. Rachel slid the notebook into her pack, zipped it shut, and stood. "All right, Ranger, I'm with you." By the time Rachel and Ranger made it back to the cabin, the fog had begun to thin. Shapes emerged in the clearing. 2 dark SUVs parked nose to nose, engines idling. Aman, in a high-visibility vest, stepped forward, clipboard in hand. His expression was practiced neutrality, the kind worn by someone used to delivering bad news without flinching. Behind him, 2 others in matching vests moved toward the porch, carrying long-handled catch poles. Rachel's grip tightened on the strap of her pack. "Can I help you?" "Ma'am, we've had reports of stray and injured animals in this area," the man said, voice flat. "We're authorized to remove them for public safety." Her eyes narrowed. "You mean kill them?" The man didn't confirm, didn't deny, just glanced at Ranger, then at the laundry basket inside the doorway where the puppy and the rescued cat lay huddled. "The German shepherd and the others need to come with us," he said. Ranger stepped forward, placing himself between Rachel and the men, hackles lifting, a loud growl vibrating from his chest. "You'll need to show me legal paperwork before you take anything." "From here," Rachel said, her voice steady but cold. The man held up a folded document. The logo of a logging corporation was printed in the corner, along with an official seal from the county. Rachel's stomach turned. They weren't here for safety. They were here to clear the land. Rears's growl deepened. Rachel shifted her stance, planting herself beside him. "You're not taking them," she said. Rachel didn't move. The men shifted, one tightening his grip on the catchpole. Ranger's growl became a steady vibrating warning. She pulled her phone from her jacket pocket, thumb sliding the camera on in one motion. Without looking down, she lifted it and began to record. "You have permission to film?" the man with the clipboard asked sharply. "I don't need permission to document someone trying to take animals from my property," Rachel said, her voice loud enough to carry. The wind caught her hair, whipping it across her face. Ranger stayed fixed in position, muscles bunching under his coat. Rachel took a deliberate step to the side, angling the phone so it captured the men, their equipment, the logging company logo, on the paperwork, and the basket just inside the door with the animals. "This is Willow Bay," she said, speaking into the phone. "A logging company is here under the guise of public safety to seize and likely euthanize rescued animals, including a trained search and rescue dog." The man lunged forward to block the lens, but Ranger stepped up, teeth bared. The man froze. From somewhere beyond the clearing, voices began to call. Neighbors drawn by the raised tone. Figures appeared at the edge of the trees, some holding their own phones aloft, recording. A woman in a volunteer rescue jacket pushed through the small crowd, eyes locking on Ranger. "That's him," she said. "Ranger, Unit 7. The shift in the air was immediate. Murmurs turned to angry shouts. The men in vests exchanged glances, tension tightening their jaws. Rachel kept recording. "So," she said, "are you still taking them?" No one answered. Engines started. The SUVs rolled backward, disappearing into the thinning fog. Rear's growl eased into silence. A week later, the clearing outside Rachel's cabin looked different. The laundry basket was gone. In its place, a makeshift pen stewed under the eaves, lined with straw and an old quilt. Inside, the orange tabby stretched lazily in the sun, while the small bird hopped along a low perch, its wing bound but healing. The puppy, now named Ember, slept curled against Rears's side. Rachel stood on the porch, a mug of coffee warming her hands, watching, as Ranger lifted his head at the sound of a car pulling up. Margaret from the general store stepped out carrying a box of donated pet food. "Word's getting around," she said, smiling. "You've got yourself a sanctuary here." Rachel glanced at the animals, then back at Ranger. The word felt strange in her mouth, but right. "Heart Sanctuary," she said. The name hung in the crisp air, settling into place. Over the next days, more people came. Neighbors with old blankets, kids with jars of coins, a retired carpenter offering to build proper kennels. Each visit was met with Rears's watchful presence and Rachel's quiet gratitude. One morning, the fog returned, curling low around the cabin. Rachel stepped outside to find Ranger already at the edge of the clearing, tail high, eyes fixed on the tree-ine. She followed his gaze, and there they were, 4 tiny shapes padded out of the mist, ears too big for their heads, tails twitching. Kittens. Ranger looked back at her as if to say, "We've got more work to do." Rachel set her mug down and stepped off the porch, the cold, damp earth familiar under her boots. "All right," she said, voice steady, a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "Let's bring them home, Ranger." Rachel often found herself standing on the porch at dusk, watching Ranger patrol the clearing. She'd thought back to that foggy morning, the blood-matted puppy, the determined eyes of the German shepherd, and knew she'd made the right choice. At the time, it had felt like stepping off a cliff, risking her heart after years of guarding it. But saving him had been more than an act of compassion. It had been a turning point. Ranger hadn't just brought her wounded animals, he'd brought her purpose. Through him, she'd found her way back to the part of herself she thought was gone. The healer, the protector. The quiet cabin was no longer a place to hide from the world, but the heart of something alive and growing. In saving Ranger, she realized he had saved her